Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the jerk off who picked Nico Price to defeat Temba Garimbo. And I'm here to recap UFC Fight Night 244 Royval versus Taira. All right, the main event of this event was amazing. Brandon Royval defeats Tatsuro Taira by split decision. I did think this was an amazing competitive fight, back and forth the whole way. And in the end, I thought it could have gone either way on the scorecards. But I did score it myself for Royval, and I did think he was the more deserving victor after that round five performance. And now that he won, I have to attribute a lot of his victory to him being the last man standing and taking it to Tyra in the end. Of course, the crux of the matter is round one, because Taira definitely won 2 and 4, and Royval 3 and 5. Round one was a toss up, could have gone either way. I thought Taira turned things around in a big way in the end by landing the biggest shots of the round against Royval, but in general, I thought Royval was ahead. And it really was a close round, but that's how you determine the winner in this fight. Uh, but still, they both had to assume it was 2-2 or 3-1 against going into round five. And the guy that was able to put his foot on the gas and take control with a lot of grappling was Brandon Royval, and he secured the victory. But look, Tatsuro Taira, this is his first loss, and my estimation of him as a fighter goes up, I guess. I'm always looking to see what a guy looks like in defeat, and I don't think this guy's got any quit in him. And I do think he could have been finished in round three, especially. I thought he was halfway to being TKO'd, but not only did he not get TKO'd, but he battled his way back into the fight again with dominant grappling, and he was throwing down, and he just showed a lot of great traits. Every trait in the book, aside from, I guess, the finishing touches on his cardio, because again, Brandon Royval was the last man standing, and that ultimately gave him the victory here. But again, could have gone either way. Tatsuro Taira is not in a lesser class than Brandon Royval, and Brandon Royval is sitting around waiting for a title shot every 2 years or whatever. He's elite. So Tatsuro Taira, for a young kid to have lost like this, I think it guarantees him as a contender at the very least in the near future, probably. And again, he wasn't knocked out. He wasn't submitted. He's got no major strikes against his overall durability, and he's young and as healthy as anybody. So I think the world of Tyra and his future. But look, Brandon Royval's the most exciting guy, or one of the most exciting guys in the sport. And it's because he's nonstop action. And if you don't slow him down and pin him like a fucking, he's like the Diaz brothers. If you want to beat them, you have to neutralize them. And that's what you have to do to Royval. Make it a boring fight. But if the fight's any bit exciting at all, it's probably a Brandon Royval victory. And he's incredibly durable himself. Yes, he was submitted by the champion a few years ago, but he's tough as all fuck. He's got no quit in him. Never truly been TKO'd. That was an injury. And to Brandon Moreno. And he showed every trait in the book to get this victory over Tyra, which is probably going to get a lot better with age. So that was fucking excellent for Brandon Royval. And yeah, I mean, he's probably going to fight. I can't say he's going to fight for the championship next because Kaya Sakura is fighting against Pantoja. They announced that recently. But Brandon Royval is definitely in the realm of fighting for a title next. Depends on the UFC's logistics. Jun Young Park beat Brad Tavares by split decision. I did think this was a very close fight, but kind of like with Royval, I thought Jun Young Park deserved to win. I thought he did win. I didn't even look at the scorecards there, but Brad Tavares, look, he won round two, I thought, and round one, he had the biggest moment where he dropped Junyon Park, although I don't know. I got to check the replay and see exactly what that looked like. either way, it was still a big moment, even if it wasn't the cleanest strike. And even though I thought Junyoung Park battled his way back into the round and won the round, I still thought it was close, and Tavares definitely had obviously some moments there. But in the end, Junyoung Park was able to get Brad Tavares down, which I thought would be the easiest path to victory. But if he was able to get the takedown, but I didn't have much faith in it because Tavares has excellent takedown defense. In the end, he wore him down enough and secured a victory with top position, and it was a hard-earned victory for Junyoung Park. Brad Tavares isn't considered the best, veteran to beat these days, but he's a solid fighter, especially if you don't crack his chin, which Park wasn't able to do here. And Tavares gave him a very good fight. But yeah, for Tavares, he's definitely obviously on the downswing. I don't even know what his UFC future looks like, but he's obviously a competitive fight for a lot of great fighters today, young fighters. And he wasn't knocked out here, which in a Brad Tavares loss, that's always a good look. So good for him. But yeah, well, he wasn't able to win this one. Chidi and Jaquani beat Jared Gooden by unanimous decision. I don't even remember them fighting on the outside. I was harping on an outside striking advantage for Chidi and Jaquani, at kicking range. I really don't remember any kicks. I feel like they started every round in the clinch. And I could be wrong about that, but this was just a pretty dreadful fight. Still, Chidi was better. Jared wasn't able to impose himself on the feet in the clinch the whole fight, and never really on the ground. So it was a tough fight for Jared Gooden. Pretty dreadful fight, but yeah, Chidi and Jaquani with a dominant victory, kinda. Uh, yeah, pretty dreadful there. But yeah, Chidi, look, he's a guy that would be a problem in the clinch theoretically. He's the taller guy, the sharper striker, and Jared Gooden just wasn't able to get out of there. Just got trapped there the whole fight. Speaking of getting trapped, Rafa Garcia was trapped under Grant Dawson pretty quickly in their fight, and Grant was able to grind him out of there in round two. That was a solid performance from Grant Dawson. I did think he was going to look dominant, but still, to get a finish over Rafa Garcia, and in the first half of the fight, too, I thought it was very impressive for Grant Dawson. He said he wanted to take his aggression and killer instinct to the next level, and he definitely looked like a killer in there, mauling Garcia. Garcia's a guy who I think will not often be finished, but this was just such a bad matchup for him. He's the guy that wants to be the dominant wrestler, and here he was outgunned in that department. And wrestlers don't typically make the best survivors on the ground, and he was getting mauled. Did a good job. His jujitsu was there. He was keeping him in his guard early, but Grant Dawson's got better jujitsu, and once he advanced, it was just too much for him. So great performance from Grant Dawson. And apparently his wife's got a nice ass. So congrats to him on that as well. Daniel Rodriguez beat Alex Morono. They showed the scorecards. I forget how they broke down or whatever, but this was generally a very close fight, and I thought generally D-Rod did better in the second half. In round one, Morono was firing on all cylinders, and it seemed like he just D-Rod couldn't figure him out. And then D-Rod started figuring him out, stopping him in his tracks with his jab, and coming forward a little bit more, I think, at the right moments. And in the end, I thought he definitely was outstriking Morono, just landing the better shots, but there were no gigantic moments in this fight, and it still was very close. Alex Morono, I scored it for D-Rod, but I still think Alex Morono can beat D-Rod or probably fucking anybody else at welterweight. He's just one of the most underrated fighters, and this loss here kind of just keeps that going. But again, I did think D-Rod won. I thought he needed to make adjustments, and he did, and he was able to figure out Morono. And he still wasn't dominating in the end, but he came alive, and I thought was bringing the volume and starting to take over the fight, kinda. So razor thin fight, but in the end, excellent performance for Daniel Rodriguez because, again, you watch round one and it looked like this was just going to be a bad matchup where he was never going to really be in it. But he battled his way back. So that was awesome. Speaking of awesome, Ramazan Bek Temirov took out CJ Vergara. I think I said something about CJ Vergara's durability. Look, I still think he is a very durable guy and he's got heart and whatever and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? His chin didn't fail him here. But that striking of Temirov, this guy looks like a fucking monster. And those body shots in the end took him out. And you don't need a weak chin to get taken out with body shots. Was phenomenal from Ramazan Bek. I think he was just too fast and too good of a striker for CJ Vergara. CJ Vergara is more limited, but he's a slow but steady tortoise type who, is historically very tough and battles his way into a fight. But here, he was at a significant disadvantage early, athletically and otherwise, and Tamarov just took him out in 2 minutes or whatever. Great fucking win for Tamarov. Really excited to see this guy. And CJ Vergara, look, he's had mixed results, mostly bad results in the UFC. He's definitely not going to be some championship contender or whatever, but I do think this is the worst he's ever going to look, and he even looked better, I guess, against Taira. I don't know. Pat Sabatini was able to beat Jonathan Pierce by rear naked choke. This was a great win for Pat Sabatini. He was all over Pierce. And I do think Pat Sabatini, I thought he had a much better submission game than Jonathan Pierce, but I think winning the wrestling battle obviously made the fight a lot more easy for him. And he was able to go through Pierce relatively quickly. Almost a full first round, but a great win for Sabatini. First round submission. Pierce, he's a guy who's been caught cold early a bunch of times, but this was what looked like a bad matchup for him. I didn't know it was going to be such a bad matchup till they were in there, but yeah, Pat Sabatini was able to take away that wrestling of Jonathan Pierce, and he looked like he was the bully in there, the guy that was more likely to win the decision, and he's got all those submission skills where he never allowed it to get anywhere close to a decision. So excellent win for Sabatini and a really rough loss for Pierce. He's a guy who had a lot of momentum just a few fights ago, but now he's got, I believe, 3 consecutive losses and was finished, submitted, I should say, in 2 of them. So yeah, a lot of negative momentum for Pierce. I don't know where he's going to go, but I still consider him a force in the UFC. Temba Garimbo beat Nico Price. Temba's a guy that, look, every time I talk about him, I express my doubts. And here, he looked really solid. I thought maybe there was a chance he could have slowed down, and he was slowing down, but he could afford to slow down over Nico Price because Nico was that much slower than him in the first place. And Temba Garimbo, it's not like he completely shut down in round 2, whatever. His grappling was there throughout the whole fight. He was able to take Nico Price down and dominate him. And on the feet, I thought he was dominant as well. I still think he's a little shaky there. And if Nico was sharper, he could have made something happen. But Demba Garimbo was much sharper, faster, kept himself safe, was moving better than Price. And I don't know the numbers, but I'm very sure he outlanded him pretty comfortably. And for Nico, it was good for him to not get knocked out and whatever, but he didn't look like such a big force in the UFC's welterweight division. Let's be honest. I know he got a nice win over Alex Morono, but yeah, here this was a very flat performance from Nico Price, and yeah, if he's given another shot, he's got to turn things around, and I think he will be, of course. Junior Tafa beat Sean Sharaf by TKO in round 2. Sean Sharaf, man, he was so close to winning at the end of round 1. And I got to give him credit for being a bull and surviving. But yeah, Tafa was having his way early and then collapsed at the end of round 1. I forget how Sharaf even got on top of him. It wasn't like some clean double leg and he turned the corner and it just fucking happened. But he ended up on top of him, and I thought he was one or two well placed shots from winning a fight, the fight with a TKO over Junior Tafa. But Junior lived to survive, and in round two, Sean Sharaf, I don't think he was able to get on top of him, but yeah, he looked pretty desperate there. Both guys were falling apart, but Tafa, the guy who had been training for a 3-round fight, and clearly didn't do such a good job, in my opinion, but he did outlast Sean Sharaf, and he had enough power where he was able to get him out in the middle of the fight. Some beautiful uppercuts where it looked like he couldn't even throw an uppercut, and he landed 3 in a row, and Sean Sharaf wasn't able to. Actually, he was able to stand, but he wasn't able to fight back. So yeah, I think the world of his chin, but he's definitely a limited guy, I think, anyway, and was taking this fight a little out of his element with only 4 professional fights. And look, I've seen this guy training years back with Luke Rockhold, unless I've got somebody different. I know there's more than meets the eye with him, but what met the eye in his debut wasn't so great. I don't know if he's long for the UFC. Might be like one of those Juan Camilo Ronderos situations. I bet. Speaking of which, look, I don't think Junior Tafa's long for the UFC either. I think he's got a lot of holes and almost got exposed last night in a big way against a guy who, like I just said, probably doesn't belong in the UFC. Julia Pilastri beat Corey McKenna by split decision. I don't know. I thought she won that fight pretty comfortably. I don't know who the hell gave her the decision. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, Pilastri's just sharper and rougher. Corey McKenna's rougher and more rugged, rough around the edges. But she's got a lot of heart. She did a good job trying to battle her way back in the end. I think she had her best round in round 3. But Pilastri was just a step ahead of her. I thought Pilastri won that fight pretty convincingly. And even though I wasted some money on Corey McKenna after round 1, she was a pretty big live underdog, and I bet on her. And whatever. In the end, she got a split decision, so I guess that justifies the shitty bet. But yeah, I thought she never battled her way back, and I thought Julia Pilastri really won that fight pretty clearly. Pilastri, she's just getting going in the UFC. Didn't have the easiest first fight, but still gave her Knudsen a good enough fight. I think she's got a future in the UFC. And yeah, this was a solid, hard-earned victory, even though it goes down as a split decision. Cody Haddon beat Dan Argueta. I think Dan Argueta looked really tough, and his wrestling was there for him. He got a good amount of control over Cody Haddon, but it wasn't enough. Cody Haddon, I think, is an excellent fighter. I have to harp on that fight he had with Steve Erceg, his one loss to the recent title challenger, and that was a razor thin fight when he had no experience. Here, he just gained a lot of valuable experience in whatever it is, his 9th fight or whatever, against Dan Argueta. Dan, I don't know if he's long for the UFC with the results he's been having lately, but I think he's incredibly tough, and I think he belongs in the UFC. I think he's a serious test, and I think he'll look more like the bully American wrestler in other matchups. But here, Cody Haddon, the Australian MMA guy, was able to beat the American wrestler. And I thought he looked phenomenal. I mean, this guy's hands are his best asset, but he's an excellent grappler altogether. And he's not somebody you can easily out wrestle. So he's got a lot going on. I think this is a win that could potentially get better with age. Could not. Depends on what happens with Argueta if he's given more shots in the UFC. But regardless, I think Cody Haddon is fucking here to stay, and there's no real major weakness of his. You know, again, you'll hear me say, hey, he can be taken down. He was taken down in this fight and in that fight and whatever. But he still looks like the sky's the limit. And the same goes for Clayton Carpenter, who was able to beat Lucas Hosha with a rear naked choke in round 2. Clayton Carpenter was just a little too big, I think, and dominant for Lucas. Was able to make his wrestling the story of the fight. And Yeah, once he got on top, he was in full control, and it was a very solid victory for Clayton Carpenter, who I thought would win. I think I picked him to win by decision. I know most of his wins are finishes here, but I thought he'd win by decision just by making it more of a grind and trying to slow down the dangerous, explosive Hosha. But he took control of the fight and secured a finish in the first half. So, very impressive win for Clayton Carpenter. He's a guy who, whatever he's had going on, he hasn't been the most active as of late, but the sky's still the limit with him as well. He's fucking looking really good, and this was a much better win, I think, than his last one over that guy, Juan Camilo Ronderos, that I mentioned before. But yeah, overall, it's a very good event, especially when it's capped off by the fight of the night in a 5-round war, Royval versus Taira. And that about wraps it up for this video. So like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Something with a notification bell, or I don't know, maybe an email address, all that horse shit.